Adana was a woman of rare grace. Her skin was always polished and her eyes held the stillness of a deep forest pool. But in Umudike, a woman's beauty was measured by the swelling of her womb, and Adana's womb remained as flat as a dried leaf in the harmattan. She had been married to Obina for 12 years. For 12 years, they had shared a bed, shared dreams, and shared the increasing bitterness of disappointment. Obina was a good man, a hard-working farmer whose yams were the largest in the village. But even a good man's heart can be eroded by the constant dripping of a mother's venom. His mother, Mama Chinedu, was a woman whose tongue was sharper than a double-edged machete. "A man does not keep a dry well in his compound forever," Mama Chinedu would scream, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "You are watering a stone, Obina. Bring a woman who can give me grandsons to carry your name, or I will find one for you myself." Adana would sit in the kitchen, her hands trembling as she peeled yams, hot tears blurring her vision. She had visited every herbalist. She had swallowed bitter herbs that made her stomach churn, and offered sacrifices until her hands were stained with the soot of many altars. Still, the cradle in her heart remained empty. It was a Tuesday, the day of the Orie market. Adana had gone to the Iocha stream, a place where the water ran cold and clear, but where the villagers whispered that the spirits of the unborn gathered. It was near the Forbidden Grove, a place where the great pythons, the messengers of the earth goddess, were said to dwell. As she dipped her clay pot into the water, she heard a sound. It wasn't a cry of a human baby, not exactly. It was a rhythmic, whistling sound, like a flute played by the wind. Adala's heart hammered against her ribs. She should run. Everyone knew the stories of the Obanje spirits that lure women into the deep woods. But something, a tug in the deepest part of her soul, pushed her toward the sound. She pushed aside the thick fans and gasped. There, lying on a bed of vibrant green moss, was a baby. The child was naked, his skin an unusual, shimmering shade of pale bronze. But what stopped Adana's breath was the texture. Across his shoulders and down his spine were fine, delicate scales that glittered like diamonds under the dappled sunlight. His eyes were not the cloudy blue of a newborn, but a piercing, intelligent amber with vertical slits for pupils. As she stepped closer, a massive python, thick as a man's thigh, uncoiled from the shadows. The snake didn't strike. It simply looked at Adana, then flicked its tongue over the baby's forehead before disappearing into the undergrowth. The baby looked at Adana and reached out a small claw-tipped hand. He didn't cry. He hissed softly, a sound of greeting. Any other woman in Umudike would have fled, screaming that she had seen a demon. But Adana saw only a creature that, like her, was alone. She saw a child abandoned by the world. Without thinking of the consequences, she wrapped the baby in her expensive George wrapper and carried him home. The arrival of the snake child. When Adana walked into the compound with a bundle in her arms, the village stopped breathing. "I found him," she told Obina, her voice steady despite her fear. "The gods have answered us." Obina's joy was short-lived. When he pulled back the cloth and saw the shimmering scales on the boy's back and the golden, slit-pupiled eyes, he fell backward, hitting the mud wall.
"Adana, this is abomination. This is a child of the water. An Eke, put it back where you found it before the ancestors strike us."
"He's a child, Obina. Look at him. He breathes. He feels heat. He is hungry. If the gods wanted him dead, they would have let the ants eat him. They gave him to me."
The news spread like a bushfire. By sunset, the compound was filled with villagers and the village elders. Mama Chinedu was at the forefront, her face contorted in horror. The Igwe, or king, of Umudike, a wise man named Igwe Oji, arrived. He looked at the child, who sat quietly on Adana's lap, watching the shouting crowd with an eerie, ancient calm. Adana, the Igwe said heavily, this child is not like us. His presence may bring the wrath of the Earth Mother. Adana said, kneeling, Igwe, I have prayed for a child for 12 years. If the Earth Mother didn't want me to have him, why did her messenger, the sacred python, guard him until I arrived? If you throw him out, you throw me out too. The village was torn. Some wanted the child drowned. Others were afraid of the sacred python that had protected him. Eventually, the Igwe made a decree. The child stays, but he must never enter the village shrine. And Adana, his blood is on your head. If any calamity befalls Umudike, we will know who to blame. Adana named him Ekene, meaning thanksgiving. The years of shadows. Ekene grew with an unnatural speed. Within 3 years, he looked like a boy of 6. He was beautiful in a terrifying way. His scales were hidden beneath his clothes, but his eyes were unmistakable. He spoke very little, but when he did, his voice had a musical, echoing quality. He was a child of compassion. He could heal a bird with a broken wing just by touching it. He knew where the water was deepest in the well and where the best medicinal herbs grew. But the village hated him. The children threw stones at him, calling him snake boy and cold blood. Ekene never fought back. He would only look at them with those golden eyes, and the children would suddenly find their tongues tied or their legs heavy as lead until he walked away. Obina, pressured by his mother and the whispers of his friends, became a ghost in his own home. He stopped touching Adana. He spent his nights at the palm wine joints, returning late and smelling of bitterness. Mama Chinedu brought her one afternoon, a young, thick-set girl with a loud laugh and a haughty gait. This is Inneka, Mama Chinedu announced. She will be Obina's second wife. She comes from a fertile line. Her mother had 10 children. She will wash the stain of this snake house away. Adana's heart broke into 1,000 pieces. She looked at Obina, hoping he would refuse. But Obina looked at the floor, unable to meet her gaze. He wanted a normal life. He wanted a son who didn't have skills. The new wife's wickedness. Inneka moved into the compound like a conqueror. She took over the main kitchen and relegated Adana to a small hut at the back. Most of all, she hated Ekene. "Get out of my way, you demon," she would scream, kicking the boy's wooden stool. She was convinced that if she could get rid of Ekene, she would truly be the queen of the house. She began to tell Obina lies, that she saw Ekene talking to snakes in the garden, that he was poisoning the food, that he was the reason Inneka hadn't conceived in her first 3 months. One afternoon, while Adana was at the market, Inneka saw Ekene sitting by the well, staring into the water. "You think you are clever," Inneka hissed, approaching him with a pot of boiling water she had prepared for Gary. "Let's see if a spirit can feel heat."
Boy,
she lunged, throwing the scalding water at the boy's face. But something impossible happened. The water didn't hit Ekene. It froze in midair, suspended like a shimmering curtain of diamonds. Then it turned to ice and fell to the ground with a clatter. Ekene stood up. His eyes were glowing like molten gold. "The heart that harbors fire will eventually be consumed by it," he said softly. Inneka screamed and ran to her room. From that day, her mind began to fracture. She told everyone that the boy had tried to kill her with magic. The Great Drought and the Hidden Truth. The following year, a terrible drought hit Omudike. The rains refused to fall. The yam vines withered, and the stream, the great Iyocha, began to dry up. The priest of the shrine,
Wise
a
one,
man
the
with
secret
white
spread, we beg for your
chalk
help.
around his eyes,
Patience.
emerged from the
Wise one,
inner
the secret spread, we beg for your
sanctum
help.
with a
Patience.
grim
The spirits
face.
guide me.
But
The
our children are
earth is
suffering.
angry, he
Wise one, the
shouted.
sickness spreads,
An
we beg for your help.
abomination
Patience.
lives among
The
us.
spirits guide me.
The
But our
water
children are
spirits have
suffering.
locked
Then
the
we act.
clouds because
Wise
we
one,
have
the sickness
allowed
spreads,
a
we beg for
thief
your help.
of souls
Patience.
to
The
eat
spirits
our
guide me.
food
But our
and
children are
breathe our
suffering.
Then
air.
we act.
Wise
The
one,
snake
sickness
child
spreads, we beg for
must
your
be
help.
sacrificed to the river,
spirits guide
or
me.
we
But our
all
children are suffering.
perish.
Then we act.
Wise one, the
The
sickness spreads,
village
we beg for your
turned
help.
into a mob.
Patience. The
They
spirits guide
marched to Obina's compound with torches and machetes. "Give us the boy," they roared. Obina, fueled by fear and Mama Chinedu's prodding, stepped forward. "Take him. He has brought nothing but shame to my house." "No!" Adana screamed, throwing herself in front of Ekeni's door. "He is innocent. Look at the sky. It is not his fault." Mama Chinedu pushed her aside. "You are just as much an abomination as he is. Move!" They dragged Ekeni out. He didn't struggle. He looked at Adana, a single tear, thick and clear like honey, rolling down his cheek. "Do not worry, mother. The truth is buried in the sand, but the rain always uncovers it." As they dragged him toward the drying stream, a strange thing happened. The ground began to vibrate. From the bushes, thousands of snakes began to emerge. Pythons, mambas, adders. They didn't bite,
snakes aren't moving.
but they
What's
formed a
happening?
living wall between the villagers and the stream. The people froze in terror. Suddenly, a voice boomed from the crowd. It was the old seer, a woman named Mankechi, who had been blind for 20 years and lived at the edge of the village. She was led by a small child, but today she walked with the strength of a lioness. "Stop!" she cried. "You fools! You are killing the only thing keeping the gods from destroying this village." The priest of the shrine sneered. "The oracle said..." "The oracle did not speak to you," Mankechi spat. "You spoke to your own greed. You took gold from the woman who truly brought a curse into this land." She pointed a bony finger at Mama Chinedu. The crowd gasped. Mama Chinedu turned pale. "She is mad. The old woman is mad."
Spirits will curse you.
No, I did
"Am
nothing
I?"
wrong, I swear.
Mankechi
Please,
laughed.
calm down.
A
Let's talk this
hollow, chilling sound.
Must confess her sins.
14 years ago,
You betrayed us.
Mama Chinedu
will
went
curse
to a
you.
No,
dark
I did
shrine
nothing wrong,
in the
I swear.
distant lands.
pouch of fortune
She was
and
jealous of
spirits
Adana's
call
beauty
of
and her
binding is
son's
fate.
love for her,
The weave is
and
strong.
she paid a
The ancestors
sorcerer
knew the rich-
to tie
I love these
Adana's
moments.
womb
Me
with
too.
copper
They're the
wire
best.
and bury it underground the
love.
threshold of this village's
The moon
main
watches.
gate.
The charm
Every
begins.
woman who walks
With
over
this
it
breath
stays
protect-
fertile, but Adana's womb was locked by her own mother-in-law. The silence was heavy. It felt like it would crack the earth. Adana looked at Mama Chinedu, her heart shattering. "Mama, is this true?" "She is lying," Mama Chinedu shrieked. "If I am lying, let the boy touch the ground. He is not a snake child of evil. He is a guardian sent by the water goddess because she saw the injustice done to a daughter of the land. He was sent to protect the one who would show him compassion." Ekene stepped forward. He walked to the village gate, knelt, and placed his hands on the red earth. The ground beneath the gate began to heave.
What is happening?
Suddenly, a small rusted clay pot erupted from the soil. It shattered, revealing a piece of copper wire twisted in the shape of a closed fist, wrapped in a cloth stained with Adana's name. The villagers roared in anger. The betrayal was so deep, so foul, that even the most hardened men wept. But the drama was not over. As the copper wire was exposed to the air, it turned to ash. At that exact moment, Adama doubled over, clutching her stomach. She felt a heat, a rushing sensation of life flowing back into a place that had been dead for over a decade. Ekene stood up. His scales began to glow with a blinding light. "My task is done," His voice echoed, no longer sounding like a child's, but like the rushing of a mighty waterfall. I was a mirror. To the wicked, I was a monster. To the compassionate, I was a son. Before their very eyes, the boy's form began to stretch and shimmer. He didn't turn into a snake. He turned into a pillar of pure, clear water that shot up into the dry, grey sky. The clouds, which had been stubborn for months, suddenly turned black. A thunderclap shook the very foundations of Omudike. And then the rain came. It wasn't a normal rain. It was sweet, cool, and smelled of lilies. As the water hit the villagers, those who were sick felt strength return to their limbs. Neka, seeing the miracle, fell to her knees and confessed how she had tried to burn the boy. Obina fell at Adana's feet, begging for forgiveness he didn't deserve. But the crowd had no mercy for Mama Chinedu. As the rain poured, she tried to run, but she tripped and fell into the very hole where the curse had been buried. When she crawled out, her skin was covered in sores that mirrored the scales Ekene had once worn. She was banished from Omudike that very night, destined to wander the forests, a lesson to all who would use darkness to fight love. 9 months later, the village of Umudike gathered again in Obina's compound. But this time, there were no torches or machetes. There was music, dancing, and the smell of roasting goat meat. Inside the house, Adana lay on her bed, exhausted but radiant. Beside her lay a baby girl, plump and beautiful. Obina sat by her side, a changed man. He had spent months rebuilding his wife's trust, walking the fields with a humbleness that earned him the village's respect once more. "She is beautiful," Obina whispered, kissing Adana's forehead. "What shall we call her?" "Her name is Ekene Amaka," Adana said, her voice filled with peace, "because the gratitude we owe the gods is big." Umudike became the most prosperous village in the land. The rains always fell on time, and the yams grew larger than anywhere else. And every year, on the anniversary of the great rain, Adana would go to the stream and leave a bowl of fresh milk and a piece of white cloth. She knew her son was watching, for in the heart of the mother who had adopted the rejected, the line between the human and the divine had been blurred by the most powerful magic of all, compassion.